Stephen Chen.
As the firstborn son of Chinese immigrants in San Francisco, my parents had high hopes for me. They came to America for a better life, and they wanted me to go farther. Unfortunately, I wasn't very athletic, so their Olympic dreams were dashed. I was tone deaf, so their urgings for me to become a concert virtuoso fell on deaf ears. I was also awkward and shy, so a career in politics was definitely out of the question. But the one thing I really excelled at was schoolwork. I always aced all my math and spelling tests. I even won our class spelling bee. Now, when I say their hopes for me were high, I mean really high. Like Mount Everest high. They didn't want me wasting my time on unimportant things either, like growing up. When I was 7, Dad had me tested at the Center for Gifted Youth so that I could skip a grade and enter the fast track of higher education. I was so proud and excited as we entered that big, space-age looking building and met all the staff in white coats. I just loved all the pictures and puzzles they gave me to work on, too. The next day, we met with the director to discuss the results. I just couldn't wait to hear how special I was. As he handed us the results, I found that I was average. What? I failed? Watching Mom and Dad shaking their heads, I felt like I failed them too. In fact, I thought my whole life might be a failure based on this one test. Imagine having your dreams crushed at the age of 7. Dad took me out for ice cream to cheer me up. You know, son, when I first came to this country, I didn't speak any English. So I failed my whole first year in high school. Dad was like God to me. How could he fail? He told me one teacher even called him mentally retarded. Dad, 10 new words every day. And after a year, he finally learned what mentally retarded meant. That made him work even harder. 3 years later, he was proud to graduate high school, second from the bottom of his class. The guy who graduated at the bottom actually was intellectually disabled. Dad just kept going, one step at a time. 4 years later, he was proud to graduate college, second from the top of his class in engineering. He looked at me and said, "You can succeed too, son, if you keep taking the next step." What's my next step, Dad? Finish your ice cream. The next day at school, I focused on just learning the next new word or the next new equation. But I just kept taking the next step. And I kept acing the next test and the next. When I was 11, my friend Bobby tried stoking up our Cub Scout campfire with a can of white gas. Boom! Bobby was running around on fire. My first day training kicked in as I tackled him to the ground to put out his flames. That was a real awakening for me. All the steps I'd taken added up to saving Bobby's life. But I needed to learn more. That's when I knew I wanted to be a doctor. Taking the next steps of high school, college, and medical school, I learned about so many different diseases. And I even got to experience some firsthand. But I just kept taking the next step, no matter how sick or tired I felt. 20 years after saving Bobby, I graduated an emergency physician. Taking the next step, I married my beautiful wife, Loretta, and together, we built a wonderful family and a home in California. I even became an athlete, cycling 100 miles a week. I was living the life of my dreams. One step at a time. Until one fall day in 2012, when I was cycling downhill at 30 miles an hour, and a deer jumped out in front of me. The impact crushed the spinal cord in my neck. I lay there in the middle of the road, literally unable to lift a finger, much less move my arms and legs. I was rushed to Stanford Trauma Center. After 2 spinal surgeries in 5 days, I was only able to wiggle my fingers and toes. I transferred to a rehab hospital for 3 weeks of intensive physical therapy, after which time I would either go home if I could care for myself, or I would have to transfer to a nursing home. But how could I possibly care for myself in just 3 weeks when I could barely wiggle my fingers and toes? It seemed hopeless. That's when Dad came to the hospital and told me, "I know things look bad now, son, but you have to keep taking the next step." Suddenly, I saw this as just another test. Only this was a test I couldn't afford to fail. I worked hard every waking moment of every day to retrain my arms and legs, struggling to take just a few extra steps each day. 3 weeks later, I was walking like Frankenstein. But I walked out of the hospital on my own. 2 years later, I even rejoined my colleagues working in the emergency room. Success is only steps away. Life is full of tests, and some will crush your dreams. But you can achieve miracles if you keep taking the next step. When you don't give up, you cannot fail. Just take it one step at a time. Contest chair.